One of my favorite events of the year is coming up, the annual Stansberry Research Conference. And folks, the conference is now officially sold out for in-person tickets. But I'm not surprised. This is one of the best industry events out there. Some of the brightest financial minds will be sharing their biggest ideas and actionable stock recommendations, covering oil, cryptos, big tech, precious metals, real estate, gold, and so much more. Well, I have really good news. You can still access all this valuable information. Go to McCall.StansberryBoston.com right now and reserve a live stream ticket. You can watch all the brilliant presentations in the comfort of your own home. Just one successful idea shared on stage could pay for your ticket and then some. I'm putting the finishing touches on my presentation right now, and trust me, you won't want to miss what I have to say. So please go to McCall.StansberryBoston.com for all the details, including the amazing speaker lineup and how to get your live stream access. Again, that's McCall.StansberryBoston.com. Folks, look for me on stage. Welcome to Making Money with Matt McCall. Thanks for joining me this Thursday, October 6th, 2022. We got a great interview coming up for you. Scott Melker, the wolf of all streets, coming on the show. Huge following on Twitter. I got to tell you, one of the brightest guys in the business, from cryptos to stocks to big picture economy. We dive into it all. Coming up right now on Making Money. Once again, thanks for joining Making Money. I'm Matt McCall. It is the 6th of October, 2022. Wow, time flies. Beautiful day down here in Florida. As I mentioned, we got a big interview coming up for you. We have Scott Melker. He's known as the wolf of all streets. He's a trader. He's an investor. He's a host of a very popular podcast called The Wolf of All Streets. Obviously, that's his name. He's author of the Wolf Den newsletter, prolific writer and thought leader when it comes to the crypto space and outside of that as well. He's been featured everywhere. Fox Business, New York Times, Forbes, Business Week, Wall Street Journal, you name it. Scott was also named the Influencer of the Year by Binance and has been recognized as a leading voice in crypto and beyond. This guy has been there, done it all. Without further ado, I want to welcome Scott Melker. As I mentioned in the intro, he's not the wolf of Wall Street. He's the wolf of all streets. I mean, this guy is big time. I've been following him for a while on Twitter. Huge following on Twitter. Talks about everything, obviously leans towards crypto. I think we'll get into that in a minute. But man, thank you so much for being on the show for the first time, Scott.
Thank you, Matt. It's really an honor to be here. I love what you guys are doing.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's talk about something that just happened recently. And you just got back from Singapore. You were there at a conference, and I believe at another conference right before that in New York, crypto related. And we have Bitcoin back above 20,000 with the stock market rallying here this week. Give me a bit of insight of what you see, kind of, boots on the ground in both New York and Singapore, halfway around the world, and what you're getting from people in the industry.
I was actually really surprised. I feel like the community is bipolar when you look at it from country to country. The vibe in the United States, I was at Masari Mainnet, which was a great conference, but I would just say it was extremely dampened, and there was a little less optimism about the future, likely because of the heavy-handed regulation that we're seeing coming down, or at least in regulation by enforcement, I would say, since we have no clarity. And the situation in the United States with the Fed, I just think that people aren't nearly as optimistic here that crypto will be able to flourish, at least the projects themselves on the ground in the United States. And then I flew over to Singapore 2 days later, and it was a completely different vibe. You would think that we were in an absolute raging bull market, like Bitcoin was at 69,000 and going to 1 million. That's really what it feels like over there, where I guess they're sort of not under the thumb of the SEC and the similar concerns that we have over here. I was actually really, really surprised because when I left New York for Singapore, I assumed it was going to be a very similar vibe, and it just wasn't.
So let's speak about, you mentioned regulation. What's your view on that? My view is, we don't know what the regulation is, if any, right now. Will a little bit of regulation, not, we don't want the government to overstep their boundaries, but will a little bit of regulation actually be good for the crypto market here in the States? Because it will allow some of the bigger institutional money to really kind of know what the playing field is and allow them to get in. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, listen, markets hate uncertainty, right? Everybody knows that. And the crypto market has been uncertain as far as, legislation and regulation in the United States since inception. And so I think there's even people in the industry that would prefer to have negative clarity than no clarity at all
Mhm.
at this point. Tell us what we can do, tell us where we can operate, tell us what sort of constrictions we have, and then we can move forward and operate from there. But not knowing, I think, is the hardest part for any project trying to build in the United States. One day it's a commodity, another day everything's a security, another day maybe some things are commodities, some are securities, some are decentralized platforms. It's really impossible, I think, to operate here. There's been some very sensible proposals like Hester Peirce. A lot of people call her crypto mom at the SEC. She's proposed a safe harbor, which basically gives a project 3 years to prove that they're sufficiently decentralized and not a security, but they can operate for that 3 years and actually try to figure that out. But obviously, Gary Gensler and a lot of the other legislators and regulators just haven't viewed crypto too favorably and seem to be taking a heavy-handed approach. I mean, the problem is, as I hinted to before, we have regulation by enforcement right now. They refuse to determine what things are, but then punish people still for being outside the bounds, which makes absolutely no sense, right? We saw Coinbase approach the SEC last year and say, listen, we want to offer a 4% yield product. SEC, Gensler, come in, talk to us, right? That's what they say. And then you go in and talk to them. They give you no answer. Why not? And say, we're going to sue you if you offer that project, if you offer that product. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't encourage people to go in. We recently just saw Kim Kardashian obviously hit with a $1.2 million fine, being sued by the SEC. Now, listen, she was promoting an outright, basically scam, Ethereum Max. Yeah. So I completely understand the sentiment there. But she did disclose that it was an advertisement. She did say not financial advice, which is a meme at this point. But apparently she was at fault for not saying exactly how much she was paid for promoting an unregistered security. Okay, that would be fine if Ethereum Max had been deemed an unregistered security, but that's never been outright stated. So I don't think the sentiment is wrong by the SEC in that case, but you have to define what an unregistered security is before you can punish someone for promoting one. Right. And so I think that right now we're just in this environment where they punish people as they see fit to make examples, and we still don't know what people are or are not allowed to do. And it just offers a very, very gray and cloudy environment.
So what's your view on this going forward? Do you think we'll have some type of clarity from the government, SEC going forward? Is this something that we have to deal with for a couple years? I mean, Gensler seems to be pretty anti-crypto in my opinion. So do we need somebody else in there, or at some point will the pressure come on from the community to push the SEC and the regulatory bodies to actually make a freaking decision?
I don't think the community can push the SEC, but I think that they can definitely push their legislators, right? Elected officials hate nothing more than losing their jobs. So that's probably where the focus needs to be from the crypto community, is passing sensible legislation that kind of puts the SEC back in their box and doesn't allow them to continue doing what they're doing. I don't necessarily know that Gensler is anti-crypto per se. I think he just wants control of every market, and there's question as to whether he will control this market or not. I don't really know what his intentions are. I just know that the approach seemingly makes no sense. We obviously have some encouragement from legislators and government officials who are pro-crypto at this point. We had the Lummis and Gillibrand bill proposed this summer, which is something I would have never expected to see on that grand stage this fast, and it had a lot of really pragmatic and good ideas. Of course, it's going to be chopped down and separated and probably taken down to its bare bones to actually pass anything. And maybe we'll see the stablecoin regulation first. Maybe we'll see a bit of a change to the tax code where you can, make a $400, $600 transaction without having to sell your crypto to do it. There's a few, like I said, really good ideas in there. I just don't see it happening necessarily under this regime. I think maybe we're going to have to see some turnover in government, or at least a time when all the politicians aren't fighting for their careers, where they're willing to take more risk and really take this on. So I think it's going to take some time, but I am encouraged that we will at least get some, decent regulation and legislation moving forward.
Scott, I want to see the world where we have politicians not fighting for their jobs every day. I feel like the moment you get elected, you're trying to get reelected in 4 damn years. It's I try not to get political on this show, and I don't, but I always say I'm kind of apolitical. Both sides of the aisle piss me off. because I feel like they're
Same,
all kind of,
same. I think they're the same.
yeah,
Two sides of the same coin.
yeah, it's sad, but sad but true. What's going on. So with regulation, maybe not moving forward at a very fast pace right now until we see a regime change here in the government. Does that put a lid on crypto prices, Bitcoin, et cetera? Or do you think they still have some upside potential in the next few years before the kind of big picture sets in?
I think they still have massive upside potential. And listen, if they're regulated away, which they won't be, but like if projects can't operate in the United States or they have fear, they're just going to go somewhere else. The innovation is going to happen. It's an unstoppable technology, an unstoppable movement. And blockchain itself will underlie everything, like the technology in our phones and in the internet. You won't think about it. You won't call them NFTs or worry about what the underlying tech. It'll just be the way that things operate because it's that mind blowing of a technology. And that's going to win no matter what, whether there's regulation or not. As for the immediate prices, unfortunately, we've seen Bitcoin become a correlated risk asset, right? And there's no question that that has been the case. I was one who was beating the drum that Bitcoin was an uncorrelated asset for years and probably took the longest to come around to that sentiment, but it definitely is the case for now. But let's go back to other times that this happened and think about it. I love to look at March 2020, right? We all know that Bitcoin famously broke down and bottomed on March 12th, 2020, when we had obviously the COVID scare and everything going on with markets there. Bitcoin broke down below $4,000, right? And the stock market bottomed 11 or 12 days later. And from there, when things turned more positive, the stock market doubled. Bitcoin, which is not even the highest beta asset in the crypto space, went up 17 times, right? From 4,000 to about 69,000. So when things turn around, which they inevitably will, recession or otherwise, when things turn around, what asset class do you want to be in? Obviously, based on just the very brief historical precedent, you want to be in Bitcoin, right? And you want to be in crypto because it's going to outperform all those other markets on the way up, just as it sort of sagged a bit more on the way down. So I think that, any hint of a Fed pivot or a change in monetary policy is going to send crypto absolutely flying. I just can't say that that's going to happen now.
Yes. I agree with you. I mean, I hope it doesn't stay as correlated, as it has become. Because I was the same as you, Scott. I mean, I was beating the drum as well, saying, kind of, it's almost like that digital gold, and should be a great time for Bitcoin right here.
But gold has also performed poorly, and so has silver, and so has everything. And the fact is, it's not really the correlation to the stock market or to tech stocks and the NASDAQ that's the really compelling story to me. It's that everything is inversely correlated to a strong dollar, right? When the dollar rages, it just absolutely destroys markets. And you have a central bank that's actively trying to dampen the price of assets, right? They want the stock market to crash. They want Bitcoin to go down. And they have the power, at least in the short term, to do that. And that's all through basically, the strengthening dollar versus all these other currencies. So I think that can only last for so long. And I think that when the world goes risk off, everything becomes correlated. That's historically true when you look at correlations. But if you still zoom out to, the 10-year correlation of Bitcoin to other markets, it's very much an uncorrelated asset. It's just been a really rough year for risk assets.
So you talked a bit about, kind of being correlated to the risk assets, the dollar going up. Obviously, whether we're in a recession or not, it's debatable. We have inflation near 40-year highs. We have mortgage rates going through the roof. We have the 60-40 portfolio on pace to be its worst since the Great Depression. The bond market's on pace to be its worst since the Civil War. So we're seeing every asset class go down here. What is your view kind of on the big picture? Because I know you're not just crypto, Scott, of really kind of what's going on with the big picture in the economy right now and your view kind of going forward with that.
Well, I think we are in a recession.
Yeah.
I think that eventually the Fed has to pivot. And I think that we're just witnessing yet another market cycle, right? People love to say this time is different, but those are the four most dangerous words in investing, according to Sir John Templeton, right? And we've seen this repeated over and over again. Humans never really change. It's funny when you look at the history of money and the history of markets. I've had guests on my podcast who throw back examples of the 1500s and 1700s and 1800s, and we're doing the exact same cycles over and over again. And that's because of the people, not because of the assets or the market itself, right? People FOMO, then they panic, then they FOMO, then they panic. And that's just the way that markets operate. I'm not concerned about the long-term health of markets as of right now. I think it's a complete disaster at this moment. Absolutely, because it was, basically created that way by the Fed and their money printing. We saw unprecedented money printing in 18 months. They expanded the monetary supply, basically increased the amount of dollars ever printed by 40% in 18 months. Of course, you're going to see a reaction to that. And now the Fed has to overreact in the opposite direction, and it's crashing everything. But if there's one thing that we know about fiat-based currencies and establishments, it's that they're going to print money, and they're going to print a lot of money again. And when they do, that's when you see all assets rise and Bitcoin rise the most, because it's a hedge against irresponsible monetary policy. Right?
Yep.
People love to say that Bitcoin should be a hedge against inflation. I don't view it that way. Right. And when they say, listen, inflation's high, why isn't Bitcoin performing well? I say, well, look at what happened, which we just talked about. When they were printing the money and inflation was increasing, Bitcoin went up 17 times. Right. That's the story. So it did act as a hedge against bad behavior by central banks. Then the central banks became responsible. And of course, those assets dropped. But we know that in the long term, central banks will not be responsible. They have to print in a debt-based economy.
Yep, I agree with you. And I think the pivot's going to be in the next 12 to 18 months, if not sooner. And we should see a nice rebound in all asset classes for the most part, most asset classes. So I want to kind of tie in two things. You talked a bit kind of like how we repeat history going all the way back to the 15th century and stuff. And I love history of the stock market and money. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And I think that's what gives probably yourself and myself an edge, because we can kind of limit the emotions. We can't take our emotions out. We're humans, right? But if we can limit our emotions of making bad decisions, and I managed money for 17 years until last year. And I used to always tell my clients, when have you ever made an emotional decision in life that worked out well for you? I mean, whether it's a wife or a husband, boyfriend, anything, work, it's the worst damn decision you ever make. But most people make emotional decisions about money all the time. So again, history doesn't repeat itself, but what drives it is human beings. As you mentioned, Scott, we're still human beings. We have that same damn lizard brain that we make stupid decisions. So I want to tie that into kind of like tech stocks right now. There's a lot of great innovative companies out there, in my opinion, that are just down 70, 80% and beat up. And people thinking, okay, well, electric vehicles aren't going to happen anymore. We can't get lithium. Oh, AI, we don't need that. Blockchain, whatever it might be. What is your view on that? Because I know you look into this stuff too in innovation. Are there opportunities out there right now?
That view is pure, unadulterated stupidity, right? And that is the exact kind of signals that you want to see for buying, and to signal that a bear market might be ending, right? When everything's dead and everything's going to zero, that's when you buy. And when everything's going to 1 million and can't be stopped and is the new paradigm and is the technology of the future, that's when you sell, right? It's very obvious how you can be a contrarian when you have this massive sentiment change in the market. A tech stock that's down 75 or 80% right now, listen, they were overvalued. So maybe they had to go down 40, 50%. But when you're talking about 75, 80%, crypto as well, that's the time that you buy. It doesn't mean that you're buying expecting that you're catching the dead bottom and that price can never go down again. I'm buying Bitcoin here. I'm buying Ethereum here. And I think they could still go down 30, 40, 50% if things get really bad. But I'm more confident that 5 years from now, they'll be multiples higher than they are at this price, right? I'm not trying to catch the dead bottom. I'm just trying to buy something that I think is going to be a long-term quality investment. There's no way that electric cars are not the future, right? If there's one thing that we know about humans, is that they'll find a way, right? Technology and innovation are unstoppable. So if there's an issue with the batteries, they're going to find a new way to make them or replace it. But gasoline guzzling cars is not the future. So yes, I think it's a good time to invest in electric cars or any of these major technology shifts that we'll see in the future. Blockchain, to me, obviously, because I'm biased, being one of the biggest. But this is a generational buying opportunity if you're not a FOMOing spaz who's just trying to make money in the next 6 months. Just is.
Yeah, amen. This is what I try to preach to people, but I got to tell you, it's not easy. When you try to I was at a bar on Sunday watching a football game, and some guy kept staring at me. He was a middle-aged guy. I guess I'm middle-aged now too, but middle-aged guy.
Me too.
Over, him and his wife. He's like, "Hey, I've listened to your podcast, big fan." And we started. I bought him a beer. We started bullshitting, and it was nice. It was refreshing. He's like, I love buying down here cheap. I like this. I've been putting more money to work. majority of people would be like, Matt, you're an idiot. Your tech stocks are down. You're wrong. We're not going to have more electric vehicles. And sometimes, I will be honest with you, doing this for over 20 years, I start thinking, shit, maybe I am wrong.
Am
maybe
I wrong?
We're going back to
of
gas
course.
guzzlers. Holy, it's amazing that it's very tough. You were a DJ, Scott. So, I always like to use this analogy. I don't want to be the first guy in a club. Like, you're up there DJing. I want to be the first guy there. I want to go to one that's got the big ass line,
So
right?
true.
It's
Yeah.
just like you feel more comfortable being in the masses, and it's the same thing in the market. You can't follow the masses; the sheep get slaughtered. It's just such
Right,
a
and this is the reason, that technical analysis and looking at charts. We sort of joke that it's astrology for men, but the reason that it somewhat works, and that you see these major capitulatory events or the blow off tops that you view on charts, is because of those exact attitudes by humans. It's when people completely panic, they give up. They sell the dead bottom, and then the smart money and the big money finally steps in and buys. You see one of those long wick candles, and that's the bottom of the market, right? The bottom is when everybody gives up and starts to believe the narratives that things are going to zero and that the world is ending. And the fact is, the world never ends and things never go to zero. And
if it does
like I said,
right,
I'm
it
not
doesn't
trying
matter,
to,
right? If it ends, it doesn't matter.
That's a great point, and completely true. But I 100% agree with you. To be quite frank, I'm more confident in what I'm buying the more criticism I get and the more people that tell me I'm stupid.
I agree. I mean, but I think we're far and few between, honestly, Scott. I don't think that's obviously, and as much as
that's why 95% of people lose money trading.
I was just going to say, but that's what differentiates us from everybody else. I kind of like it. Like, I don't want to be like that greedy guy right now saying that, but I kind of like it. I feel the same way. The more that people say I'm stupid, I was at a meeting recently and with a bunch of investors, and I got to tell you, out of about 20 or 30 people in that room, smart people, successful, all ages, all backgrounds, I'd say about 85, 90% were extremely negative right now. And I remember we had a dinner that night. I drank too much wine. And I was like, listen, I got to tell you guys, I love that you all are negative, because I'm positive. And I think this is one of the greatest signs that everybody, when the masses are like that, it was the same way 2 years ago when we did it and everybody wanted to buy everything.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's crazy. It seems simple, but it's not that simple, I guess.
Well, it's not that simple because you're watching your actual net worth drop and you have to sort of, to buy more when you're watching everything go down is very challenging. I would honestly argue that it's harder to sell the top than it is to buy the bottom, because that's when you really think that you're missing out on an opportunity. So it works at both poles. That's why traders make the meat of their profit within the move and not by catching the dead bottom or the dead top, right? You wait for the trend to reverse. As you said, you're not the first guy in the club, but you're also not necessarily the last who's showing up at 159 when they're closing at 2, right? You're somewhere in the middle, and you can have a lot of fun being that guy in the club. You definitely do not want to be first, though.
No. I still don't like to be the first guy. I'm still the guy waiting in line. I mean,
that's the worst part about being the DJ.
Yeah.
The opening DJ is literally the first guy in the club. Right?
So you and I are both next week going to be in Vegas, speaking of clubs, at a Web3 conference. And I know you are basically emceeing the whole damn thing for 4 days. So anybody's going to be out there is going to see you on stage the entire time. What are your views quickly on just Web3 in general? I know you could probably go on for days about this, but what's your view on that now, Scott?
I'm extremely bullish, obviously, on Web3, but with the caveat that we've seen a number of bubbles that had to pop. A lot of people sort of draw the comparison of the crypto market or the Web3 market with the tech boom of the late 90s and early 2000s, and they view that as a negative thing, right? Mm-hmm. They say it's just like that. The bubble popped, all these companies, the pets.com, they went to zero. What a tragedy. To me, it's a positive. It's a positive comparison, because out of that rose the biggest companies in the world and the most important companies for the next 20 years, right? The Googles and the Amazons all were the successful companies that came out of that bubble popping. So we've seen the DeFi summer 2 years ago. Then we saw NFT summer last year. Then we saw metaverse fall, almost a year ago when Facebook rebranded and everything in the metaverse went crazy. And of course, when you have a situation like Web3, where you have all of this innovation and you have a lot of money to be made, you're going to see all of the entrepreneurs and smart people come in and try to innovate. And 90% of them, like in any other business, are going to completely fall on their faces and fail, right? But you assume that they'll advance the ball a bit for the more successful companies, and that in the next cycle, these will be the most impactful companies in the world. And I really believe that. I really believe that blockchain companies will be the Googles and Amazons of the future. So do I think that we need 1,000 companies in Web3? No. But do I think that there will be 5 or 10 winners that will be sort of, have their genres, NFT, metaverse, play to earn, gaming? I think that we will have massive winners in each of those spaces. And maybe the ones that will be the winners don't even exist yet, right? Yeah. Because it's extremely, extremely early. People are always like, what coin, listen, the coin and the company are not the same thing, but what coin will be the winner of the next cycle? And I sort of joke, first of all, it's always Bitcoin. But second of all, if we're talking about which coin will perform the best, it's not going to be Bitcoin. And I usually joke, probably doesn't exist yet, right? Yeah. If you look back, the 2017 ICO companies never really boomed again after that, right? And all the companies that were created in the 2020 sort of 21 bull run, those haven't really seen their big move yet. And so I'm assuming that in a space where you're constantly innovating and having new technology and new companies, that maybe the big winners of the next bull cycle are things you haven't even heard of. So it's very hard to predict. But Web3 in general is extremely exciting. And I think we will see incredible innovation and things that change the world coming out of that space. We just need the UX and UI to be improved so that we don't get hacked or scammed when we're trying to use it.
Sure. So you talked about, that next big companies may not even exist yet, or they're kind of just an idea in somebody's garage or basement. Are there any publicly traded companies that the average investor can gain any exposure to the metaverse or Web3 or, just blockchain in general that you like?
I think it's tough. I mean, there's the obvious ones where you can gain exposure by buying Coinbase, or if you're passionate about Bitcoin, of course you can buy MicroStrategy. I wouldn't necessarily buy a futures ETF or any of those products that have been approved that are subpar, GBTC, anything like that. Really hard to gain exposure right now, I think, to Web3 in general through publicly traded companies. But I don't see a reason why you would do that instead of just buying Ethereum, right? If you want exposure to all of Web3, you buy the layer ones, right? Because it's very hard to choose that next big company, the huge winner of the next cycle. But if you own the platforms that they're built on and the infrastructure, then you're going to capture some of that upside regardless, right? I think Ethereum obviously is the biggest name there. Now you can stake Ethereum safely for, 5, 6, 7% yield. They think that will increase. It becomes a deflationary asset. And we have massive companies being built all over Ethereum. But also you take a look at, Avalanche and Solana and the other layer ones. If you have exposure to all of these, it doesn't really matter which individual project wins because they're being built on those platforms. So if Solana becomes the gaming layer one, then anything built in gaming, you capture some of that upside. If Ethereum becomes the base of DeFi and this new decentralized financial system, you capture all the upside of anything that's built by owning and having exposure to Ethereum. So to me, that's the approach. I don't see a reason right now to invest in crypto through the legacy market unless you're literally trying to do it in IRA and you have no other way to gain exposure or something like that. But there's no excuse at this point to not just go buy some Bitcoin and Ethereum.
You make a great point there. It's similar, but in the stock market, I call that, kind of picks and shovels plays, where you don't have to bet on, let's say, the electric vehicle companies being a winner. You bet on the lithium miners, you bet on the battery makers, because regardless, they have to be bought. And it's a similar strategy you're using here with the layer ones. Yeah. So you don't have to pick
and that winner. So take it right. And so you can kind of take a look at where venture capital is going, and that there's been massive, massive raises by Andreessen and other huge venture capitalists. And that's the approach they're taking. Right. In general, yes, they're spreading their money out across a lot of these smaller projects, but their biggest bets have always been the infrastructural plays, and the richest people in crypto are the ones who own the exchanges, right? Yeah. Sam Bankman-Fried and CZ from Binance, they don't care which asset wins. They just want to make their trading fees on giving you exposure to all of them. I think picks and shovels is the way to go. And it confuses people how to do that in crypto. But to me, that is exposure to as many layer ones as you feel comfortable with.
I love that.
Bitcoin included.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So before I let you go, I always ask every guest the old island question. If I shipped you and your family, whoever else you want to take with you to the most beautiful island for the next 10 years, no connection at all, what's the one asset class or one investment that you would be very comfortable buying, owning, and 10 years from now, you come back to the States and like, oh shit, look at this.
Can I take two?
Yeah, you have two.
Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Right.
And it's absolutely a no-brainer because I view Bitcoin as digital gold. I think that it will rise with time, no matter what, because obviously it's programmed to do so with the halving and the deflationary aspects of it, but also because I just believe that central banks will continue to be irresponsible and that that's the best future hedge against that. And Ethereum, I think, is the best sort of I hate when they're compared to one another, I should say, because I view it as Bitcoin and effectively everything else. There's Bitcoin, which is digital gold, store of value. Everything else is a speculative venture capital technology investment. And I think Ethereum is the best one. So listen, if you're asking me which one will go up more in the next 10 years, I think the answer is Ethereum.
Yeah.
Which one am I more comfortable holding as a retirement asset to pass on to my children? The answer is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would take those two, viewing Ethereum as the best sort of speculative tech investment and Bitcoin as holding that digital gold.
I love it, and I hope you're right because I have quite a bit of both. So I'm
Good.
I'm going to go on. I'll be on the island with you, and hopefully we come back very, very wealthy and happy men at that point.
Well, I have exposure, a lot of it to both of them. I'm still actually trying to figure out how much exposure I have because a lot of my assets, unfortunately, are on Voyager. But we will see what happens.
Oh man. All right. Well, man, it was so good having you on, and I'll see you in a week, and hopefully we can catch up and I'll grab you. I know I get a busy week coming up in Vegas, but I'll definitely see you there, and we'll catch up. Are you going to be DJing while you're out there?
No, I haven't DJed in 5 or 6 years,
Okay.
but I can guarantee that neither you or I will be the first guy in the club in Vegas.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. All right, Scott. Thanks so much for coming on, and we can't wait to have you back on there again soon.
Thank you, Matt.